Hello and welcome, I'm Nikhil Nas. That Srinivasan should resign is something that every sane voice in the world of cricket had been saying for a very long time. But the BCCI president remained defiant. Instead of introspecting and addressing the problem at hand, Mr. Srinivasan launched an all-out attack against the media, saying he will not allow the media to bulldoze him. But today, the Supreme Court has said what TV channels and newspapers had been reporting all along, that if cricket administrators are serious about cleaning the muck in the game, then Srinivasan needs to step down, thanks largely to the conflict of interest that the BCCI boss finds himself in. Joining me on the show this evening will be a host of special guests, but first let's find out what transpired in the Supreme Court today.
It's nauseating that Srinivasan continued as BCCI chief. Srinivasan should go if cricket has to be cleaned. If Srinivasan doesn't step down, we will pass an order. The Apex Court raised valid questions on Tuesday and BCCI chief clearly had no answers.
Will you step down, sir? Will you step down?
Srinivasan may not be speaking, but that doesn't mean that there's not been any reaction from the BCCI.
It's the highest court of the country, so there cannot be any appeal against that. Therefore, if it's a direction from the Supreme Court, it has to be followed.
Eventually, it's now come to this state where the Supreme Court, the highest court of the land, has had to, come down on the board, which to me personally is a very sad thing.
Srinivasan is a very experienced person. He knows the law quite well, and I think he'd take the right decision.
What's really interesting is that the Apex Court's observation on Tuesday was based to a large extent on the contents of the sealed envelope submitted by Justice Mukul Mudgal committee. This envelope has names of some prominent people who were allegedly involved in betting and match fixing. The contents in the sealed envelope led the top court to take note of the gross irregularities in the BCCI and ask BCCI President Srinivasan to leave. Not only that, they questioned the council on why should the court believe in BCCI's guarantees of cleaning up the system.
माननीय न्यायालय ने कहा है कि श्रीनिवासन जब तक के स्टेप डाउन नहीं करते हैं मैं आपकी कोई बात नहीं सुनूंगा। आप क्रिकेट को क्लीन करने की बात करते हो लेकिन गंदगी तो आपके अंदर भरी हुई है। बीसीसीआई वाले सुप्रीम कोर्ट से भी अपने आप को ऊपर समझ रहे थे। उनका मैटर यहाँ चल रहा है। आईपीएल का उन्होंने तिथि अनाउंस कर दिया।
The next hearing of the case is on Thursday, which literally gives the BCCI one day to decide its future course of action. Many of the top officials who are in Dubai for an Asian Cricket Council meeting are likely to be summoned to Chennai for an emergency meeting on Wednesday. In New Delhi, Rika Roy for NDTV.
Right, joining me on the show is cricket commentator Charu Sharma. Thanks so much for joining us here on NDTV, Charu. Firstly, how do you see this playing out in the next 2 days? Remember, Srinivasan has 2 days now to resign, but I'm just going back into the history of how it's happened in the past 2 months. He's remained defiant. Do you now see him resigning since this is an observation made by the Apex Court of the country?
Well, there's no doubt, Nikhil, that he has been boxed into a corner. Now, you might have said that, the media and a lot of other people were asking for his head. He doesn't need my defense, but I was the one who has constantly said that what will be achieved by having him leave? But to answer your question, yes, I think it's now become a situation where if he doesn't go, then the chances are the Supreme Court might say you have to go, and which of course will be a big blow, not just for him personally, but for the entire cricket fraternity in India. So, to my mind, unless there's a master stroke somewhere, which I'm not aware of, I think he will possibly leave in the next day or so. But of course, the succession has to be planned. We can't leave a sport headless, of course, the many other people. But I will get back to my original thought on this whole thing, that, why are we pegging all problems of the game right now, with the game right now, on one individual? I know he has, he has to bear or bell the cat, as it were, being the head. But are we suggesting, just think about this for a moment dispassionately, that if Mr. Srinivasan steps down or goes or leaves, that everybody else is a fabulous individual? If they were so keen on ethics and good governance, I'm sure they would have had a bigger voice in the board so far. So by asking one man to go, against whom there are no specific charges, except of course, and I know I'm not condoning him for this whole clean chit drama that went on a few months ago, what will his going achieve? You mean the board will suddenly turn around 180 degrees and be this now, new clean virgin bride? What?
Right. Charu, to answer your question, two things I'd like to point out. Firstly, you're saying why is everything going to change if just one individual resigns? Well, you know, the reason that the Supreme Court has asked for his resignation is based on what they found in that envelope. I don't know what's in that envelope. You don't know what's in that envelope. However, they go on to say that there are serious charges. So for all you know, those charges could directly be related to Mr. Srinivasan, which is why the Apex Court has taken that decision.
All conjecture. Why are the contents of that envelope not shown to us? If cricket's a national sort of pride and pastime, all of us deserve to know.
Correct, but we can't question the sensibilities of the judges who are there at the Apex Court. I'm sure they must have had valid reasons to ask and to go ahead and say that it was nauseating that he continued as the head of the BCCI. I'm sure there must be something very serious in that envelope.
Well, please tell us. You know, why are we not privileged to this information? Are none of us capable of handling it? Come on.
Well, I'm guessing because certain players, what the Supreme Court has said that they want to probe it, they want to investigate it, and once they have enough proof is when they're going to tell us or make this public inside the envelope.
I cannot believe that the Supreme Court, the pillar and temple of justice in this country, is passing strictures on something that's not proven yet. That's impossible. Obviously, it contains a lot of proof. They can't now say, well, here's something in the envelope, but of course we have got to find out. You know, and they can't then, you know, kill somebody or hang somebody or somebody step down if it's not proven yet. So there must be charges in there which are very important and all of us do need to know.
Fine. I'm sure we'll get to know in due course. The other thing that I'd like to point out, because you mentioned that, you know, one individual going is not going to change everything. It's not going to be a 360-degree turn. However, the case in point here, Mr. Srinivasan, there is a conflict of interest that none of us can deny, which is why probably the Supreme Court has singled him out, saying that unless he's there as the head and because of conflict of interest that him owning an IPL team, his son-in-law now being investigated for illegal betting, which is why he needs to go and no one else in the BCCI. Not to say that he's guilty, but so that the probe is fair, he needs to go for the moment, and that's why they're asking for him.
I'm glad you asked those three words. Not that he is guilty. Now, I really still believe that we should not hold him responsible for his son-in-law's activities, illegal or otherwise, because, I mean, surely you have a brother, all of us have relatives.
For the probe to happen, he needs to step aside.
I agree. I agree, which he did earlier, and of course it turned out to be a disaster because, you know, of all the clean chit drama. But even if he, one, steps aside, you think the rest of the board are now what? You know, I mean, are they going to gang up against him and come up with stuff to damn him? I don't think they'll drop the establishment down. They're all pillars of it. And they could have, if they had to effect a change in the board, they could have all come out earlier and said, Mr. Srinivasan, if you don't mind, step aside. Let this happen through other agencies which are more neutral, and we'll take it forward. But I mean, they didn't do that. The rest of the board did. There are a couple of people who resigned, I must admit, but the rest just carried on. So the bulk of the board, if it doesn't change, how are we to presume that the exit of one man will change the attitudes and the thought processes and this whole omerta thing behind the board?
Okay. Because we still don't know exactly what the Supreme Court observation is, I'll go across to my colleague Rika Roy, who was there at the court. Rika, one question that most sports fans will have, and especially people who want this game clean, is that for the moment, is it possible that Mr. Srinivasan resigns, but then what stops him from coming back as BCCI president? Because in September again, we'll have the voting. He's got a one-year extension. He remains outside, but after the probe is complete, he comes back, he gets elected.
Well, Nikhil, what I understood from the Supreme Court proceedings is that the court wants him to go and go for good. In fact, they said that Mr. Srinivasan is where all the problem begins. They use the phrase, he's the root of all the problems, which is why they want to eliminate Mr. Srinivasan. Of course, this is South Zone's turn. So if Mr. Srinivasan has to leave in between, a person from South Zone has to take his position. And in September there will be fresh elections, which will be East term, and then one would require a nomination from the East to become the president of BCCI. What the court basically has said that Mr. Srinivasan should stay out for cricket to be clean, for there to be a fair probe.
Right, you're saying that what you've understood is the Supreme Court says he should go for good. But just to play the devil's advocate, what's wrong in him coming back once the probe is over, once he clears his name? What's wrong in him coming back then?
Well, that is something the Supreme Court judges will be able to answer, what's wrong in him coming back.
I'd like you to look at this objectively as someone who's covered cricket. Would there be anything wrong if he clears his name, then to come back?
Well, that was the idea when he stepped aside. He said that once the probe is complete, once the culprits are nailed, he will come back. That formula we've already seen BCCI taking to. Mr. Srinivasan did come back and take charge as the president of BCCI once that probe was complete, which the Bombay High Court called illegal and unconstitutional.
Right.
One doesn't really know whether, the Supreme Court will agree to that formula once again. It's really shameful, Nikhil, that Supreme Court is now dictating a private cricket body and that they're asking the chief to go for good.